I want to call upon our next guest, and he's been a conservative political watcher, activist, government relations feller for a lot of years. His name is Brad Tennant. You know what? I was just looking at a column he wrote a couple of years ago uh, called "The UCP is More United Than a Lot of Pundits Believe." And it was a story that he wrote in our friends at True North. And I read that headline, "The UCP is more united than a lot of pundits believe." But look at the date on it, November 28th, 2021. And alas, it would be the next year that the party, well, at least, I don't know about if they were disunited, but half of them voted to give the boot to Jason Kenney. Well, we are in a similar position with a new leader trying to keep together the different strands of the party. And I'd like to ask Brad Tennant, who is now a big shot in government relations in Alberta, does he believe that the UCP is united? I don't know if we have Brad ready to roll. Am I getting a little ahead of myself, or is he
There
ready
he
to
is.
go? There he is.
You're
Brad, welcome to our Rebel News broadcast. I'm delighted to report that we have nearly 3,400 people watching on YouTube, and on Rumble we have nearly 5,000. So we're coming up on 10,000 concurrent viewers, and the polls haven't even closed. Brad, it's great to have you here. I was just referring to an article you wrote for True North a couple years ago about the party being united, and that's what's on my mind, because Danielle Smith was an outsider. She wasn't from the caucus. She had flavorful views. She was a critic of Jason Kenney, and there were some grumbles. How do you think let's say the party wins tonight? I want to be optimistic. Does Danielle Smith, does it work for her actually only really begin tonight? What's your thought on that whole thing?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Ezra. It's not as nice here as it is in your new fancy studio, but we're trying to have a good time here nonetheless. And I think you asked an important question here, and I think this is something that's been seen here over the last month. The NDP, which started this campaign, focused on negative advertising, focused on Danielle Smith, has really tried to set this message that the UCP is not united. I can say that through campaign offices, through our local MLAs, through different campaigns here are united. Danielle's been traveling the province. She's been working with different campaigns, different elements of the party, rural and urban, and everything of the sort. So I think that this campaign has shown that it's united. And if you want an example of that, just look at how far down the media and NDP and parts of the NDP had to go to find a conservative who would speak out against Danielle Smith. For example, they could only bring up MLAs that had long been against the UCP since the starting of the merger, or had long been against the United Conservative Party. So, look, I think the UCP is united. I think that I could say through door knocking, this is a voting base that does not want the NDP back, and I think that this is a party that's united.
Yeah, Brad, I want to ask you one more question before I turn you over to my colleagues. I know that you have a history as an advocate for what I like to call ethical oil. And the war in Ukraine, by the way, is an absolute reminder that if you're not buying oil from Canada's oil sands, you're buying it from one of the world's authoritarian regimes, whether it's Russia or OPEC. And I can only daydream what would have happened had we built the Keystone XL pipeline, the Trans Mountain pipeline, the Northern Gateway pipeline, the Energy East pipeline. Right now, not only would Canada be wealthier, but that's on the oil side, and getting LNG going, Canada could have really not only helped ourselves, but actually helped the world. Because the biggest weapon that Vladimir Putin has is the energy weapon. That's where he gets all his money from, and that's how he has Europe over a barrel. So let me ask you, I mean, it's been 10 years since I wrote a book called Ethical Oil, and really things are actually worse now in terms of getting oil to market. What's your long-term prognosis for Alberta's oil and gas sector? I mean, there's people out there who say we have to transition off it down to zero. What do you think the future is for Alberta oil and gas?
Well, and I think in the last 10 years, you've seen, Ezra, really since you wrote that book and beginning from there, people have become vocal defenders of the oil and gas industry. I think that that's a industry that a lot of people have benefited from. A lot of individuals have been able to make a good living, provide for their family, and then power every single part of our lives, as well as the international benefit that comes from Alberta being a player in the energy market. So I think the last 10 years have been massive for an industry of people that don't usually defend themselves to start defending themselves. Now, I think there was a bit of a head start done by activists who are against the oil and gas industry, and they've really, really been pushing, as you know. So, they had a bit of a head start on this, but I do think, whether you look at the movement of Cody Battershill and individuals like that in Calgary who have been fighting for oil and gas sector, that there is a movement going further and further. I was at the Calgary Marathon yesterday, and if I saw one, I probably saw 30 people wearing I Heart Oil Sands shirts. This is something that Albertans are defending, and I think it expands even beyond oil and gas for resource sectors we have to defend. We saw an NDP activist or an NDP candidate during this campaign compare oil and gas to slavery. We saw many NDP activists, our NDP campaigners who were formerly anti-energy activists. So this is something we've got to remain vocal in, and I think people are starting to understand this. This is something that 10 years ago it might have been rare to be vocal in defense of, but something going forward I don't think a lot of Canadians who see the benefits of our resource sector ever will be again.
Yeah, you'd think that those revelations about NDP candidates saying end oil, leave it in the ground,
Yeah.
would be disqualifying. It even more shocking than what they said is the fact that Rachel Notley said, yep, that's our guy. We're talking with Brad Tennant. He is the Vice President for Alberta of Wellington Advocacy. Let me hand you over to my good friend, Sheila Gunn-Reid.
I just want to build on something Ezra was talking about there. Yeah, the mainstream media is not talking about these anti-oil kookaloos. They're completely getting a pass by the mainstream media. Instead, the mainstream media is dusting off disgruntled former, I guess, somebodies who've been nobodies for the last 8 to 10 years, like Thomas Lukaszuk, to question the UCP. You pointed out that this is just a sign of desperation. Is this a reflection of just how bad the internal polling is for the NDP? I'll ask you to speculate.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would have to speculate, but I can remember last campaign, they did the exact same rerun of this. They did a campaign then where, they paid an actor to create an ad and say that actor supported Jim Prentice and would never support Jason Kenney or the UCP this time around. And then I remember it took hours until people learned this was an actor who was very, very against the PCs the entire time and basically an NDP activist. They saved the money on actual hiring actors this time, and they just went with, gentlemen like Thomas Lukaszuk. I guess they'll work for free to do these sort of things. But it was the exact same thing they did in 2019. Pretty much the exact same characters. So unique, but a sign of desperation maybe, but definitely not a sign of anything new.
Brad, it's great to have you with us. I know you're very busy and you have much to do, but I want to invite my colleague, Adam Soos, to put a question to you, and then we'll let you go and do your magic out there. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, so beyond the sort of drama actors and all that staging, I also wanted to sort of ask your perspective on the media coverage of this election. It seems like there'd be a great deal made of all the sort of personal attacks, the pulling up of old radio clips that were done on a talk show. Just to what extent do you think that the, I would argue, biased media coverage of this election perhaps skewed results? And do you view, if there is a UCP win tonight, that is even more of a win because it was a success despite all that effort pushing against them?
Yeah, and I think a good question and in two important parts. So I think there is some bias in the media. I think conservatives have encountered that for some time, and I think it's something that conservatives are learning how to act with. Like, they've got to be able to speak directly to their voters. They can't count on the media filter. So I think conservatives, and look, they're not going to be perfect when they're trying this first. It's a unique challenge to meet, but I think conservatives are getting better and better at that. And I think that at the same time, the mainstream media isn't something to ignore. It's something to work through. But I also think folks at home are starting to see sometimes that the media can see things a different way than they can, and it's up to them a little bit to do their own investigation. And secondly, I think this would be a huge win if the UCP can do it. There's been a lot of challenges. going back to the article Ezra brought up, like there's been a lot of challenges in the last year. There's been a lot of challenges that have come. And all that being said, if the UCP can complete this, I think that's a very, very good thing. It's a very, very good thing for us to point towards in the future. And it's a good thing to rally around, but nothing you could take for granted, right? Like you're not going to win as a conservative without a concerted effort. And if we do it here, it's something worth celebrating.
There you have it, Brad Tennant, Vice President for Alberta of Wellington Advocacy. Thanks for taking the time with us. Good luck to you and your advocacy. And we'll say goodbye to you now. And Sheila